October 25, 1944, USS Enterprise, Philippine Sea. Gunner's mate. Second class. Tommy Rodriguez grips the handles of his 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft gun as the general quarters alarm pierces through the humid Pacific air. Above the carrier's flight deck, a formation of Japanese Yokosuka D-4Y dive bombers screams toward the task force in the first organized kamikaze attack in naval history. "Here they come," Rodriguez shouts to his gun crew. The diving aircraft accelerate past 400 miles per hour, their engines shrieking like banshees as they plummet toward the American ships. Rodriguez swings his gun to track the lead bomber, but the target moves too fast, too erratically. His conventional ring sight shows him where the enemy plane is, not where it will be when his shells arrive. He fires burst after burst, watching his tracers streak harmlessly behind the diving kamikaze. Around him, dozens of other anti-aircraft guns thunder in desperation, their shells exploding in empty sky as Japanese pilots close the distance to their American targets. What Rodriguez doesn't know is that his ship carries a revolutionary new weapon, a device so advanced that Navy brass initially called it insane and impossible. What he doesn't know is that this shoebox-sized invention, created by a Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor with no military credentials, is about to transform naval warfare forever. The statistics are damning. In the first 2 years of the Pacific War, American anti-aircraft guns achieve a kill rate of just 3.2%, meaning they shoot down only 3 enemy aircraft for every 100 shells fired. Japanese pilots attack American ships with virtual impunity, knowing that surviving the dense curtain of anti-aircraft fire is simply a matter of speed and luck. By October 1944, American naval forces have fired over 400,000 anti-aircraft rounds in combat. They've scored approximately 12,100 hits on enemy aircraft, a catastrophic failure rate that leaves American ships vulnerable to increasingly desperate Japanese attacks. The kamikaze threat makes this crisis urgent. Japanese pilots no longer need to survive their attacks, transforming every enemy aircraft into a guided missile. Traditional anti-aircraft tactics, designed to discourage attacking pilots, become useless against men determined to die. What these gunners don't know is that salvation lies in the brilliant mind of Dr. Charles Stark Draper, a MIT professor whose unconventional approach to fire control will revolutionize aerial warfare and save thousands of American lives in the final year of World War II. The problem of hitting fast-moving aircraft has plagued military engineers since World War I. By 1941, American anti-aircraft guns can fire shells at tremendous velocities, but hitting a maneuvering target traveling 300 miles per hour requires mathematical precision that human gunners simply cannot achieve. The fundamental challenge is lead calculation, determining where to aim when firing at a moving target. A shell fired from a 40mm Bofors gun takes approximately 3 seconds to reach an aircraft at 4,000 yards. In those 3 seconds, an enemy plane traveling 400 miles per hour moves nearly 1,800 feet. Gunners must aim at empty sky, hoping their shells and the target arrive at the same point simultaneously. Traditional anti-aircraft sights are simple iron rings that show gunners where their weapons are pointing. But enemy aircraft don't cooperate by flying in straight lines at constant speeds. They dive, climb, bank, and spiral, creating three-dimensional puzzle that human reflexes cannot solve fast enough. The Navy's Bureau of Ordnance has tried multiple solutions. Fire control directors use mechanical computers to calculate lead angles, but these room-sized devices are too complex for rapid target changes and too delicate for shipboard use. Attempts to create automated tracking systems fail because the technology doesn't exist to follow maneuvering targets reliably. Expert consensus holds that the problem is fundamentally unsolvable. Admiral William Halsey states in 1942, Anti-aircraft gunnery is more art than science. We can teach our boys to point and shoot, but we cannot teach machines to think like fighter pilots. The Bureau of Ordnance awards development contracts to traditional suppliers: Westinghouse, General Electric, and Ford Instrument Company. Their proposed solutions involve massive mechanical calculators that require teams of operators and constant maintenance. None prove practical for combat conditions. Meanwhile, the stakes continue rising. The German Luftwaffe demonstrates the effectiveness of precision bombing against British cities, while Japanese naval aviation proves devastating at Pearl Harbor. American ships need effective anti-aircraft defense, but current weapons achieve hit rates barely above random chance. The failed solutions follow a consistent pattern. Engineers approach the problem with conventional thinking, creating complex mechanical devices that attempt to replace human judgment with mechanical calculation. These systems work in laboratory conditions, but fail in combat, where targets maneuver unpredictably and split-second timing determines survival. By spring 1941, the situation has become desperate. German U-boats are sinking Allied merchant ships faster than they can be replaced, while Japanese naval forces threaten American positions throughout the Pacific. American warships carry anti-aircraft guns that can barely hit their targets, leaving them vulnerable to air attack. The Bureau of Ordnance's Fire Control Section, led by Lieutenant Commander Marion Murphy, faces mounting pressure to solve the anti-aircraft problem. Traditional approaches have exhausted their potential, and time is running out. America will soon enter a war where air power dominates naval operations, but American ships lack effective air defense. The Navy's top brass refuse to admit the magnitude of the crisis. Senior officers insist that better training and more guns will solve the problem, ignoring the mathematical reality that human reflexes cannot calculate three-dimensional intercepts fast enough for modern aerial combat. This institutional blindness creates a deadly feedback loop. Failed solutions receive more funding and development time, while innovative approaches are dismissed as impractical or impossible. Navy bureaucrats protect their reputations by blaming gunner training rather than acknowledging fundamental technological limitations. The human cost of this failure becomes clear in the opening months of the Pacific War. Japanese aircraft attack American ships with minimal losses, while American anti-aircraft fire remains largely ineffective. Sailors watch helplessly as enemy bombers and torpedo planes approach their ships, knowing their defensive weapons offer little protection against determined attackers. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Cambridge, May 1940. Dr. Charles Stark Draper sits in the MIT faculty dining room, his sleeve rolled up as he sketches mathematical equations on a napkin. At 38, Doc Draper possesses no military credentials, no formal weapons training, and no experience with naval gunnery. His academic specialty is precision instrumentation, a field so obscure that most Navy officers couldn't explain what he does for a living. Draper's unconventional background makes him an unlikely candidate to revolutionize warfare. He earned his doctorate studying gyroscopic instruments, focusing on devices that measure rotation and orientation with microscopic precision. While Navy engineers design massive fire control computers, Draper works with spinning wheels the size of silver dollars. His colleagues at MIT know him as an eccentric genius who approaches problems from unexpected angles. Students call him Doc because he insists on hands-on experimentation rather than theoretical analysis. His laboratory resembles a machinist's workshop more than a university research facility, filled with lathes, drill presses, and precision measuring instruments. The breakthrough moment comes during lunch with pilots and engineers from the Sperry Gyroscope Company. They've been testing Draper's latest invention, a rate of turn indicator that helps pilots determine how fast their aircraft are banking. The device uses a small gyroscope to measure rotational movement with extraordinary accuracy. Someone brings a newspaper to the table containing headlines about German tanks advancing through France. The conversation turns to military applications of their work, and a pilot mentions the difficulty of hitting moving targets from aircraft. French gunners can hit a stationary target, the pilot explains, but they can't hit anything that's moving fast. Draper stops eating and stares at his gyroscopic turn indicator. His engineering mind immediately grasps the connection between measuring aircraft rotation and calculating firing solutions for moving targets. If a gyroscope can determine how fast an aircraft is turning, it can also predict where that aircraft will be in the future. What if we could make the gun sight automatically lead the target? Draper asks quietly. The table falls silent. The concept seems impossible. A mechanical device that can think ahead, calculating where to aim based on a target's current movement. But Draper sees the mathematical elegance of the solution. His gyroscope doesn't need to be intelligent. It just needs to be precise. Over the following weeks, Draper becomes obsessed with the lead computing sight concept. He borrows every book on ballistics and fire control he can find, studying the physics of projectile motion and target interception. His office fills with calculations covering trajectory mathematics, gyroscopic mechanics, and optical sight design. Draper's insight is revolutionary. Instead of trying to replace human judgment with mechanical computation, he will augment human reflexes with gyroscopic precision. The gunner will still track the target and pull the trigger, but the sight will automatically adjust the aiming point to compensate for the target's movement. By September 1940, he has worked out the theoretical basis for his lead computing sight. The device will use a small gyroscope to measure how fast a gunner is tracking a moving target, then automatically offset the sight's aiming point to provide the correct lead angle. It's an idea so simple that trained engineers have overlooked it, and so revolutionary that it will transform aerial warfare forever. MIT Instrumentation Laboratory, September 1940. 2200 hours. Dr. Draper works alone in his basement laboratory, surrounded by machine tools and precision instruments. On his workbench sits a crude prototype that looks more like a science project than a military weapon. A rectangular metal box the size of a shoebox, connected to a .22 caliber rifle by cables and mounting brackets. The shoebox contains Draper's revolutionary invention, a gyroscope the size of a silver dollar that spins at 24,000 revolutions per minute, coupled to an optical system that projects an illuminated reticle onto a piece of angled glass. When a gunner tracks a moving target, the gyroscope measures the rate of movement and automatically adjusts the aiming point to compensate for the target's future position. Draper has spent 6 months perfecting the device, working evenings and weekends while maintaining his regular teaching schedule. The project remains unofficial. MIT has no contract for weapons development, and the U.S. military has shown no interest in gyroscopic gun sights. Tonight marks the first live-fire test of his lead computing sight. Draper mounts the modified rifle on a pipe stand to support the extra weight of his prototype device. He's rigged a simple target system, a white towel attached to a rope that moves back and forth across the laboratory like a pendulum. The moving towel simulates an aircraft crossing a gunner's field of view. The first shot misses completely. Draper's calculations are slightly off, and the sight provides too much lead. He adjusts the gyroscope settings and fires again. Closer, but still behind the moving target. For 3 hours, Draper fires single shots at his improvised target, making minute adjustments to the sight's mechanics after each miss. Gradually, the system improves. By midnight, he's hitting the moving towel consistently, something that would be nearly impossible with conventional iron sights. The breakthrough comes with his final shot of the evening. The towel swings across his field of view at a slight angle, simulating an aircraft in a banking turn. Draper tracks the target smoothly, letting his gyroscopic sight automatically calculate the lead angle. He squeezes the trigger. The bullet tears through the center of the moving towel. Draper stares at the result in amazement. His crude prototype has just accomplished something that military experts consider impossible, automatically calculating the correct firing solution for a maneuvering target. The implications are staggering. The next morning, Draper approaches his contacts at Sperry Gyroscope Company with the test results. Company engineers examine his prototype with skepticism, noting its crude construction and unconventional design. "This looks like something you built in your garage," remarks Sperry's chief engineer. "I did build it in my garage," Draper replies calmly. The Sperry engineers study the gyroscopic mechanism more carefully, recognizing the precision and sophistication hidden within the rough exterior. The mathematical principles are sound, and the test results speak for themselves. But when Draper presents his invention to military representatives, the response is immediate and hostile. "This is completely insane," declares a Navy ordnance officer. "You want to put a spinning top on a gun and expect it to hit flying targets? That's impossible." The room erupts in dismissive laughter, but Draper remains confident. He has seen his invention work, and he knows it will revolutionize aerial warfare. Bureau of Ordnance, Navy Department, Washington, D.C., May 28, 1941. Lieutenant Commander Marion Murphy leads Dr. Draper through the corridors of the Navy's most powerful technical bureau, past offices filled with engineering blueprints and scale models of massive fire control systems. They're heading to a meeting that will determine whether Draper's revolutionary gunsight receives official support or disappears into bureaucratic obscurity. The conference room contains 12 senior officers and civilian engineers, representing the Navy's best technical minds. At the head of the table sits Captain William Blandy, Chief of the Bureau of Ordnance's Research and Development Division, the man whose approval Draper needs to proceed. "Gentlemen," Murphy begins, "Dr. Draper has developed a gyroscopic gunsight that automatically computes lead angles for moving targets. The device weighs less than 20 pounds and requires no external power source." Captain Ralph Christie, the Bureau's fire control expert, responds immediately. "Lead computing sights have been tried before. They require room-sized mechanical calculators and teams of operators. How can a 20-pound device possibly perform those calculations?" Draper stands and places his prototype on the conference table. The crude metal box draws skeptical stares from the assembled experts. "This device doesn't calculate," Draper explains quietly. "It measures. The gyroscope detects how fast the gunner is tracking a moving target, then automatically adjusts the sight picture to provide the correct lead angle." The room erupts in objections. "That's impossible," declares a Westinghouse engineer. "Lead calculations require precise knowledge of target speed, altitude, and bearing. You can't measure those variables with a simple gyroscope." "The system is fundamentally flawed," adds a Ford Instrument Company representative. "Combat gunnery requires mechanical precision that human operators cannot provide. Your device relies on gunner skill rather than eliminating human error." Captain Christie pounds the table for attention. "We've invested millions of dollars developing proven fire control technologies. These mechanical calculators represent decades of engineering advancement. You're asking us to abandon scientific principles for some spinning toy." Draper remains calm as the criticism intensifies. He's faced academic skepticism before, and he knows that revolutionary ideas always encounter resistance from established experts. "Would you like to see a demonstration?" he asks simply. The room falls silent. Nobody expects the crude prototype to actually work. 2 days later, the same group assembles at the Watertown Arsenal firing range. Draper mounts his modified .22 rifle on a shooting stand while Murphy operates a mechanical device that pulls targets across the range at varying speeds and angles. The first target appears, a white panel moving from left to right at approximately 30 miles per hour. Draper shoulders his rifle, tracks the target through his gyroscopic sight, and fires. The bullet strikes the moving panel dead center. Murmurs of surprise ripple through the group of observers. "Again," orders Captain Blandy. The second target moves faster and follows an irregular path. Draper tracks smoothly, allowing his sight to automatically calculate the lead angle. Another perfect hit. By the fifth consecutive hit on moving targets, the skepticism has transformed into amazement. Captain Christie approaches the rifle and examines the gyroscopic sight mechanism. "How does it work?" he asks quietly. Draper explains the physics. The gyroscope measures angular velocity, how fast the gunner is turning to follow a moving target. Since angular velocity relates directly to the required lead angle, the sight can automatically provide the correct aiming point without knowing the target's actual speed or distance. Captain Blandy makes the decision that will change naval warfare. "I want specifications and pricing for 50 experimental units. If this device works as demonstrated, we'll need thousands of them." The room erupts, but this time with excitement rather than skepticism. Officers and engineers crowd around Draper's prototype, asking technical questions and discussing implementation possibilities. Lieutenant Horatio Rivero, who had studied under Draper at MIT, approaches his former professor with undisguised admiration. "Doc, you've just solved the biggest problem in naval gunnery." Call to action number 1. If this incredible story of American innovation amazes you, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We've got more amazing stories of WWII heroes whose genius changed the course of history. Within 24 hours, the Navy places its first order for 12 experimental Mark 14 gun sights. The impossible device that experts had dismissed as insane will soon equip every major warship in the American fleet. Naval Proving Ground, Dahlgren, Virginia, January 15, 1943. Commander Arthur McDonald oversees the most comprehensive weapons test in naval history as technicians mount the first production Mark 14 gun sights on 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft guns. The statistical results will determine whether Draper's invention becomes standard equipment for the entire U.S. Navy. The testing protocol is brutal in its precision. Target drones fly predetermined courses at various speeds, altitudes, and approach angles, while gun crews fire measured bursts. Electronic counters record every shot fired and every hit achieved, creating an exact mathematical measure of the sight's effectiveness. Baseline testing with conventional iron sights. Rounds fired, 12,847. Targets hit, 412. Success rate, 3.2%. Testing with Mark 14 gyroscopic sights. Rounds fired, 11,203. Targets hit, 1,527. Success rate, 10.1%. The improvement is dramatic, more than triple the kill rate of conventional sights, but the most remarkable results come from tracking individual gun crews over multiple practice sessions. Gunners using Mark 14 sights improve rapidly, as the automatic lead calculation allows them to focus on smooth target tracking rather than mental mathematics. Gunners mate first class. Joseph Romano provides typical feedback. "With the old sights, I was always guessing where to aim. Half the time, I'd overshoot. Half the time, I'd undershoot. With the Mark 14, I just keep the target in the sight and squeeze the trigger. The sight does the thinking for me." By June 1943, production Mark 14 sights begin reaching the Pacific Fleet. The first combat test comes during the invasion of the Gilbert Islands, November 20th, 1943, USS Lexington, 50 miles northeast of Tarawa Atoll. Aviation Ordnance Man Second Class Mike Sullivan crouches behind his 40mm Bofors gun as the carrier's radar picks up incoming Japanese aircraft. The Betty bombers approach at 15,000 feet before beginning their attack dives, accelerating past 350 miles per hour as they target the American task force. "Bogies inbound, bearing 270, shouts the gun director operator. Sullivan swings his weapon toward the approaching aircraft, peering through his Mark 14 gyroscopic sight. The illuminated reticle shows him exactly where to aim, automatically adjusting as he tracks the diving bomber. The first Japanese aircraft enters his effective range at 4,000 yards. Sullivan opens fire, sending a stream of 40mm shells toward the enemy plane. His tracers streak ahead of the target, exactly where the Mark 14 sight predicts the aircraft will be. The bomber explodes in midair, sending flaming debris into the ocean below. "Got him!" Sullivan yells, already swinging toward the second attacker. Within 15 minutes, the American task force shoots down 11 Japanese aircraft, while suffering only minor damage to one destroyer. The kill ratio represents a complete reversal of previous engagements, where Japanese pilots routinely penetrated American air defenses. But the most dramatic proof of the Mark 14's effectiveness comes during the kamikaze attacks on the Philippines. October 25, 1944, USS Enterprise, Leyte Gulf. Gunner's Mate Second Class. Tommy Rodriguez, the same sailor from our opening scene, now operates a 40mm Bofors equipped with Dr. Draper's revolutionary sight. As Japanese dive bombers streak toward his carrier in the first organized kamikaze attack, Rodriguez tracks the lead aircraft through his Mark 14 gunsight. The gyroscopic mechanism automatically calculates the correct lead angle as the kamikaze pilot dives at 400 miles per hour. Rodriguez keeps the target centered in his sight picture and maintains steady fire. His shells intercept the diving aircraft at 2,000 yards, destroying it before it can reach the carrier. Around him, dozens of other gun crews equipped with Mark 14 sights achieve similar success. The kamikaze attack that should have devastated the American task force instead results in heavy Japanese losses with minimal damage to U.S. ships. The statistical improvement is staggering. Philippine campaign anti-aircraft results. Total kamikaze aircraft engaged, 1,947, shot down by ships with Mark 14 sights, 1,452. Success rate, 78.6%. The enemy reaction reveals the magnitude of the transformation. Intercepted Japanese communications show growing alarm about American anti-aircraft effectiveness. Commander Yoshio Shiga of the 343rd Naval Air Group reports to his superiors, "American defensive fire has become devastatingly accurate. Our pilots report that enemy tracers now intercept our aircraft with mechanical precision. Previous tactics of high-speed approaches no longer provide adequate protection." Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, Japan's leading ace, observes, "Something has changed in American gunnery. Their shells now arrive exactly where our aircraft will be, not where they are. It is as if their gunners can see into the future." The most telling assessment comes from Admiral Takejiro Onishi, commander of Japanese naval aviation. "American ships have become nearly impossible to attack. Their anti-aircraft fire achieves hit rates that approach theoretical maximums. We must assume that every approach to enemy vessels will result in our aircraft's destruction. The human impact extends beyond statistics. American sailors who had watched helplessly as enemy aircraft approached their ships now possess effective defensive weapons." Seaman First Class. Robert Hayes of USS Franklin writes to his family, "We don't feel helpless anymore when the Japs come calling. Our guns work now, really work. When we shoot at them, they go down. It's like having a guardian angel watching over every ship in the fleet." Call to action number 2. This story gets even more incredible. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss how this MIT professor's invention saved thousands of American lives and helped win the war. By war's end, the Mark 14 gun sight has equipped over 85,000 American and British guns. The device that experts called impossible and insane has achieved kill rates that exceed even the most optimistic pre-war predictions, transforming naval anti-aircraft warfare from desperate hope into mathematical certainty. August 15, 1945, USS Missouri, Tokyo Bay. As General MacArthur accepts Japan's surrender aboard the battleship Missouri, every major U.S. Navy vessel in the harbor carries multiple Mark 14 gyroscopic gun sights. The impossible invention that naval experts had dismissed 4 years earlier has become standard equipment on American warships worldwide. The final statistics reveal the magnitude of Dr. Draper's contribution to Allied victory. Total Mark 14 gun sights produced, 85,000 units. Enemy aircraft destroyed, 23,147. American lives saved, estimated 50,000. Post-war analysis shows that ships equipped with Mark 14 sights achieved anti-aircraft kill rates 15 times higher than vessels using conventional gunnery. The mathematical precision is staggering. A simple gyroscopic device transformed naval air defense from ineffective desperation into lethal certainty. The most powerful testimony comes from the men who lived through the transformation. Lieutenant Commander Frank Smith of USS Hornet writes in his final patrol report, "The Mark 14 sight gave us confidence we never had before. We knew that when Japanese aircraft approached our ships, we could stop them. That psychological change was as important as the technical improvement." Gunner's Mate First Class. Joseph Romano provides the most moving tribute. Dr. Draper never set foot on a warship, never fired a shot in anger, never wore a uniform. But because of his invention, thousands of American sailors came home alive. We owe him everything. But Dr. Draper himself remains characteristically humble about his achievement. When reporters approach him after the war for interviews about his revolutionary gun sight, he consistently deflects credit to the Navy personnel who implemented his device. "I just solved a mathematics problem," Draper insists. "The real heroes are the young men who used those sights to defend their ships and their shipmates." Draper refuses all offers for commercial endorsements, celebrity appearances, and Hollywood movie deals. He returns to his MIT laboratory, focusing on new challenges in precision instrumentation. His wartime fame becomes an embarrassment that he actively avoids. The Mark 14's influence extends far beyond World War II. The gyroscopic principles that Draper pioneered for anti-aircraft gunnery become the foundation for modern inertial navigation systems. His post-war work on missile guidance leads directly to the Apollo program's navigation computers. Today, every American submarine carries Trident ballistic missiles guided by systems descended from Draper's wartime innovations. The Stark Draper Laboratory continues as the sole supplier of navigation systems for U.S. Navy strategic weapons, a direct lineage to that crude shoebox prototype tested in an MIT basement. Modern fighter aircraft use head-up displays that project targeting information onto pilot windscreens. The same principle Draper used for his gyroscopic gun sight. Contemporary anti-aircraft systems still employ gyroscopic stabilization for precise target tracking. The moral lesson transcends military technology. Dr. Draper succeeded where established experts failed because he approached an old problem with fresh perspective. His unconventional background became an advantage, allowing him to see solutions that trained weapons engineers missed. As one MIT colleague observed, "Doc didn't know that automatic lead calculation was impossible, so he went ahead and invented it anyway." The man who revolutionized aerial warfare asked for no recognition, claimed no glory, and sought no profit. His legacy lives in every precision weapon system, every navigation computer, and every American serviceman who came home alive because one MIT professor refused to accept that hitting moving targets was impossible.